I love this group. I learned so much when I was chapter president of what was BMA Colorado at the time by watching what the Chicago group did. And I know we had a nice positive competitiveness about each of the chapters. And it's really fun to be here and be a part of one of your events and see some familiar faces here. It's great. And I'm going to, let's see, I'm going to share my screen just to start things off. Can everybody see my screen? Yes, okay, I hear some heads nodding. We're not that kind of day yet, but I do want to say I wish I could be there for the beer and tacos. So I know what I am going to go out and have for lunch after this because I'm an hour earlier than Chicago. But I am so happy to be here to talk about innovation because as Dakota and I have been talking over this last month and Shivani and Kathy Button-Bell and I have talked over the years, it's really interesting to watch this dynamic of innovation and how it's perceived now in business. And especially if we look at the whole world of transformation and really pushing things and pushing the envelope of what we believe can be done and what we know has to be done in these last 2 years. So when it comes to innovation, there's a lot of, I think, like heaviness around it. We think it has to be complex. We think it has to be time consuming. We think it has to be expensive. We think it requires experts. So the first thing I want to do is have everybody just drop into the chat. How do you define innovation? Because I think it's something you could ask 20 different people and you'd have 40 different responses at least. So everybody just drop your own definitions of innovation into the chat. Let's see, Kristen said disruption. Let's see if we have any others. A new way of doing things that adds value. Using data to improve old ways of doing things, a different approach, putting ideas into action. These are great. These are great. And I think one of the things that's really important to keep in mind is that we have to understand that before we can do something, we have to have a common definition of what that thing is. So if I were to say to you, okay, go sprint down the street, and you had no idea what sprinting meant, you wouldn't be able to perform that behavior. So that's a really important aspect to keep in mind as we even talk about the subject of innovation, much less rethinking innovation, is that we have to understand what the definition is. So for my sake, and what I'll talk about innovation as today from this point of view is here's my definition, is that innovation is consistently coming up with new, great, and reliable ideas. Now, it's a very simple definition, but each one of those words has a very powerful role in the definition. So first, we'll start with what is a new idea. A new idea really is something, it can be completely disruptive. I mean, disruptive is a word we hear with innovation quite often. It can be like personal computers, video streaming, smartphones, these things that we know as technology. But to be a new idea, it doesn't necessarily have to be something that has never been done before. In fact, some of the most innovative things that have been done are looking at where do people take inspiration from other areas. So if we look at the iDrive system in the BMW car, inspiration for it came from the video game console, you know, the video gaming console. And so was it new and never been done before? Absolutely not. But it was absolutely new in the automotive industry. We look at the drive-through in a McDonald's fast food restaurant. It was modeled after a Formula One pit stop. They had very much the same criteria. They wanted people to come in and out very quickly and very efficiently. So the second criteria is, what is a great idea? And a great idea is something that makes you feel really good. It inspires you, it gets you excited. It starts to bring out that emotional side of you. And it's something that advertising great David Ogilvy talked about. It's something that makes you kind of like catch your breath and makes you a little jealous and envious that you didn't think of it yourself. So a great idea is much more subjective than an idea that's new or reliable. So for example, do you guys remember the Palm Pilot? I I hear some heads on it. Like, I thought this was the greatest thing in the world. And I remember being in meetings and holding it up and beaming addresses back and forth. I thought it was the greatest thing ever. Now, not everybody thought it was, so it's subjective, but this is an example of a great idea. Now, our third criteria is a reliable idea. And one of the things that that's a point of contention around innovation, creativity, and ideas is that ideas are the easy part. It's the execution that's the hard part. But let's be honest, if you came up with an idea and it was a no-brainer how to execute it, it wouldn't be that much of a disruptive idea. We need ideas all the way through the process. So a reliable idea is one that you can build your business on. And it makes your company money because you can execute them. But we have to look at a reliable idea as one that actually contributes to the growth of your business. And I think this is one of those characteristics that really differentiates creativity from innovation in people's minds, is that it's something that has a financial impact. So if we look at an idea that truly is reliable, along with new and great, you think about the app Shazam. This is something that 4 guys who went to college together went to college at the same time together. They got together, it was actually over beers, imagine that. And they came up with this idea of essentially the phone book for music. And absolutely it's reliable. It was sold to Apple for reported something like $17 million. Might have been more than that, I can't remember. It was a lot of money, but it was a reliable idea. So to be truly innovative, an idea has to have all 3 of these characteristics. It has to be new. It has to be something that surprises and delights people because it's unexpected. It's great because it inspires and excites you as the person who's going to push and really champion that idea. And it has to be reliable. It has to be an idea that actually makes you money. Now, when Dakota and I were talking about what we were going to talk about today, one of the things that I wanted to share with everybody is that there is a one question that you can use as a litmus test to understand how ready for innovation, or like what your benchmark is for innovation in your own company. And we're going to get to that in just a minute. But first, I wanted to talk about what marketing's role is in all of this. Because as we look at what's going on in organizations and really the history of marketing and what we do as a profession, it's been really interesting. So as we transition into understanding what innovation is and our own definition, and moving into what our role is, this is where we really need to start to rethink innovation and broaden the definition, because truly innovation is everybody's business within an organization. So if we start out first and we talk about what is it that people believe about innovation? I mean, there's this whole aspect of it has to be complicated, expensive, and time consuming. That's one aspect of it. But when we get into leadership belief about innovation, there's some interesting things. The first one is, this is research from PwC. 92% of CEOs in the survey said that innovation is absolutely critical to business success. Yet only 6% were happy with their results. So that's a huge opportunity gap between what we want and what we're actually getting. And we're going to have some great conversation with Shivani and Kathy about how to make this actually happen. But as we look at belief, if we believe it's important, but we don't necessarily believe it can happen, right? If the results aren't matching the expectations, next we move into actions. What's actually happening that creates that gap between what CEOs and executives and companies want with innovation and what's actually happening with results? So there's an interesting dynamic and an interesting dynamic that's happening around innovation. So if we look at innovation, we think of it normally as these innovation groups, right? Your innovation hubs, special, unique teams that are tapped with innovation. But the truth is 90% of innovation happens outside of traditional product development, service line development, innovation type groups. Yet, where do we see all of the investment go? 75% of innovation investment goes to these traditionally organized and recognized groups within a company. So we're saying, okay, why are we spending 75% of our investment to something that only has the potential of a 10% return? Because then we start to look at what are the outcomes based on what we're currently believing and doing around innovation. And this is a fantastic statistic from Harvard business professor Clayton Christensen. 95% of all product innovation fails. So what we actually have before us as marketers is this incredible opportunity. There is so much low-hanging fruit, and that's really what innovation is right now. If we look at the investment and the opportunity, innovation is the low-hanging fruit of business, and marketers are leading this harvest. And that's what we're going to talk to Shivani and Kathy about today. Because really, as we shift from what we believe, what we're doing, and the outcomes that we're realizing, we have to change how we look at the culture of innovation. So I know at least for 20 years, we've been talking about the trilogy, the three-legged stool of people, processes, and technology when it comes to business performance, when it comes to transformation, when it comes to marketing, certainly. But if we look at all three of those characteristics, I mean, technology, I can remember when you could actually read the logos on Scott Brinker's annual slide of the number of technologies that are out there available for marketing. And I think in last year's report, he said there were more technologies just in Europe than there used to be globally in 2016. So we have no shortage of technology. And when you think about processes, the number of times I hear, well, I can't do that because I haven't filled out form 651B yet. We have more processes than we ever want to deal with. But the part that's been grossly neglected is the people part, the culture. So I want to just get into three areas that I believe are really, really important as we start in talking about the culture of innovation and how to build this type of culture. So the first thing is looking at purpose. And there are many companies who are highly, highly aware of purpose now. They'll give it lip service, but even if they've taken the time to identify and articulate their purpose, they aren't necessarily making business decisions against it. And this is really a big missed opportunity when it comes to really creating innovation inside a culture, is that first you have to build it on a really strong foundation. And that foundation is purpose. When you look at companies that have this definition of purpose and they keep it front and center and they infuse it into everything that a company does, the values, how they make decisions, how they hire, fire, reward, and reprimand, really cultivate that behavior that makes purpose come alive. These are companies that have a much greater opportunity and success for innovation within them. Now, the second characteristics is values. You may have purpose and it may be articulated and you may have it everywhere, but unless you make it very clear, what are the values that make that purpose come to life in how you perform and behave and deliver experiences as an organization, then your purpose will never be anything more than a poster on a conference room wall or on your about page of an organization. So values are really creating clarity about what it is that you value and how people come together and how they work. And the third thing that I want to talk about is really creating space within a culture. It could be physical space. I know not everybody is back in a physical work environment, but if you are, do you physically have space to get together, to brainstorm ideas, to talk things through, to collaborate in different ways? Is there actually space to do that? The second part is emotional space. And this is what Google is very well known for, that 20% of their time to work on projects. Is there emotional space to truly explore your creativity and your innovative side? And then the third part is the failure space. And many times companies give lip service to innovation and say, yeah, we know you have to fail fast, you have to fail forward, you have to, we love failure. And then there's a little asterisk that says, as long as you don't actually fail. I went to an exhibit that was in Minneapolis over the holidays. It was, I think, December and January, and it was a traveling exhibit called the Museum of Failure. And it's curated by a gentleman named Dr. Samuel West. He's from Stockholm, Sweden. And that's what he really wanted to celebrate, is that you don't get to truly innovative outcomes and ideas and experiences unless you fail somewhere along the way. So these are 3 things that I wanted to cover and look at as we move into broader conversations with both Kathy and Shivani. And I wanted to welcome both of them here today because I know you both are very, very busy, but it has been so fun digging into the topic of innovation and the work that both of you are doing and that you have going on. So thank you both, Kathy and Shivani, for being here. And let's see, Kathy, you're in St. Louis today, and Shivani, you're in Chicago, right?
That's right.
That is right.
That's good.
I like it says Kathy Button-Bell under both pictures.
Oh my gosh, it does. I'm sorry about that.
It's like digital twin.
Yeah, I'll have to fix that. Here, I'm just going to slyly move on to the next slide here if we can. Kathy, I'm going to turn it over to you to kick off and talk about some of the things that you've been doing and share that story. And then we'll have some time for Shivani to do the same. And then we'll open it up for questions. So as we go, please drop questions, comments, thoughts into the chat, and we'll make sure to get to these.
Right. Well, thank you, Carla and Shivani. I was hoping it would say your name underneath my picture, but you have a much more interesting name than I do. So, welcome to everybody. I actually love Dakota's opening. I would actually say about the yes. And I would actually use an interesting thing about that, about personal innovation and personal branding, about saying yes, is I think it's Shonda Rhimes was very famous for the year of saying yes. And the year after I got divorced, I decided to call the year of saying yes. And I experienced a lot of this with Carla because for some dumb reason, I agreed to be chair of the BMA. And I agreed to be president of the Princeton Club of St. Louis. And I went on a public board. And I took on a whole new campaign here. And I got to tell you, I got more. Oh, I went on the school board, which was the biggest time suck of your life. Little thing to everyone, don't include that in your year of saying yes. It's a bad idea. But from a personal branding standpoint, I learned more about the year of saying yes to kind of rebuild myself. And I think it has a lot of optimism to it. Dakota, I love you shared that with everybody because it was absolutely great for me. So now at the same time, we actually instituted this really simple matrix. And one of the things that had happened at Emerson in innovation was all of a sudden it looked like we had 60% new product development going on. And it turned out that, and for some reason, price was going down, which shouldn't happen if you're innovating at that kind of a clip. And we realized that we were calling new product development or new products things that were really minor revisions or major revisions of current products, which is a very, very risk-averse approach to new product development. And it means there's a market for it already, but it's really code for price reduction and cost reduction for us. And we always say, you will never shrink yourself to greatness. It was merely trying to protect market share at the expense of profitability. And then we started to actually put numbers into these 4 quadrants and started to reward people for taking the risk to go up to new to the business, new to the world ideas per product. And it made an enormous difference. And this is right 2008, 2009 in the teeth of a lot of trouble. And it's so interesting because we put in time, not just money you were spending, but people. Because the time for imagination and exploration is probably the biggest cost in the top part of that quadrant. Now, you don't want to move everything up there because that's way too risky, but you just need to, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it up here. The interesting thing was, this is right in the teeth of the recession. We advertise on CNBC a great deal. What a depressing moment. I mean, going into a bear market, it is not a happy time. And we decided we had to be the optimistic face of global business. And 2 things, and this is, Carla and I talk about this all the time, and her early part of her presentation showed how lots of times you just repurpose an innovation you see somewhere else. And I don't care if it's a product like she showed there, or a way to express yourself, like advertising or a campaign or your brand. And I was driving through New York and in Soho, and on the side of a building, there was a giant ad for like little iPod things, and they were brilliant, brilliant metallic paint just dripping down the side of that building, showing it. I didn't even have a headline. I think it just said iPod on it or something. And I went, oh my gosh, we all have to do this. It is such a simple thing. People don't have time or inspiration to read. They want to be delighted. Going back to your, I loved your lion. So go to the next ad. And I took that slide I just said, and I took a copy of that ad of what was going on in New York and gave it to DDB and to Marcia Kabuchi. And I said, I need to marry these two ideas. And they came up with the "It's Never Been Done Before" campaign. And it's great. Our tagline for past 20 years has been "Consider It Solved," which worked really well. This was about getting to the top of that matrix. And, you know, as Carla says, there's millions of ideas and millions of products out there. If you don't talk about them with the exact same kind of innovation in your thinking, they will fail also. And this was about, and this is kilos of bananas, so I must have been running this internationally somewhere, which is funny. But it was about how the tiniest bit of variation on a banana makes it go bad. And we do all the refrigeration in shipments of Dole bananas from Latin America back up here. And it was the most successful, optimistic kind of campaign. I was just saying it ran in the Wall Street Journal. I think this actually came out of the London airport at Heathrow. We ran them on scrolls all over the world. But it was very successful because it was so memorable. It was so unexpected in the middle of the Wall Street Journal. The ads we got for television, we used all some avant-garde kind of brand new music from all over the world kind of thing behind it. I think the high point of a compliment was actually a guy who was watching CNBC and said, our music was too jarring while he ate lunch watching CNBC. And I go, good, like, I'm glad to hear that. So, but it shows kind of where we were at a time like that. And this perpetual innovation machine, not just for our products like our refrigeration, but just as importantly in how we presented ourselves in an unexpected way. As you might imagine, this was not your average 4-color ad in the Wall Street Journal, which means you have to go on a 4-color page, which is usually the international business page, which I always feel sorry for those poor guys writing those very serious articles, and my banana was right underneath them. So a kind of a great pleasure. But going forward, times change. And I think Shivani has a great deal of inspiration behind some of this, as Carla talks about humanizing your brand as you go forward. And if you go to the next one, I'll show where we are. So we have a brand new CEO we have here at Emerson, and he deserves a brand new campaign and even a new tagline. But what a different moment we're in on our innovation. And you can go to the next picture on there, Carla. And this is, just so you know, my entire company has not seen this yet. So all of us together have to pinky swear not to talk about this. But and I'm going to use we make faster science as the difference of humanizing the extraordinary science that we're selling. Even we make sleep. That's actually an ad for compressors that make you more comfortable. We tested 4 or 5. We had a very, very aggressive and interesting market research project to pick a new tagline, which is "Go Boldly," which matches the transformation moment we're in. Especially our company is right in the absolute teeth of that. I think every company is, but and I think that We Make Faster Science is the best example of everything from DEI to moving faster to loving that woman for running And I love her hair. There was a woman sitting in front of me on the airplane the other day with exactly that hair. I was ready to cast her for the commercial. I didn't know she could run that fast or not, so I couldn't test her out on that. But I just think it shows the movement and the change of innovation as you move forward, and how your purpose has to come out of the loin of the company, and then it needs to be moved forward with a modern taste and unexpected kind of flair. So I'll leave it there for, since I have Shivani's whole life on my desk here with notes written all over it. I'd love to hear her talk about it.
All right, thanks. So inspirational over there, Kathy. And I love the human touch, right? Even as simple as the angle of the photography of the baby, right? It just speaks to you, really, really humanizes the hair, the way you described it, really beautiful.
Thank you. Actually, I like Carla makes the point that it looks like the baby's crying an Emerson logo, which is kind of funny.
I never thought of it that way until you mentioned now. Yeah. But she has a smile. She or he has a smile on the face. So folks, a little bit about my journey in terms of from a innovation standpoint. About 2 years ago, my CEO for North America reached out to me and said, Shivani, I'd like you to take on the role for innovation in North America. I, at that time, for 6 months prior, had been running our Midwest innovation team, so in Chicago. And he loved the pivot that I was doing. He's like, love it. Now do this across North America. So the first thing when I took on the role, what I did was I said, I'm not an innovator, right? And this is, especially after reading Carla's book, I'm going to take that out of my vocabulary, right? Because I did actually tell him that why would you want me? I'm not an innovator. I'm a business person. I'm a strategist. But again, reading Carla's book, that is going to be out of my vocabulary now, right? But I did tell him that. And so one of the first things that I ended up doing was I got my Accenture research company, my Accenture research, do a 360 research for me. So what are my clients saying on innovation? What are my competitors in North America doing on innovation? What are my teams saying? So I did a full 360 view on innovation. And in terms of what my clients and my competitors are saying, the first biggest thing that came out was, well, we need an ROI on innovation. And what's really important is, the revenue and the profitability. But very close behind, second on that list, and we were right in the middle of the pandemic at that time. Second on that list was also the culture of innovation, that executives actually want to drive and want to focus on building a culture of innovation. So I started to pull on that thread. I found that very interesting, that right after revenue and profitability is the culture of innovation. And so I worked with Tom Krasmarsky. So many of you in Chicago probably know Tom. He is the founder of Chicago Innovation. He's a professor at Kellogg. So I worked with him, his team, my Accenture research team, and my core innovation team. And this was almost about 18 months end to end, the whole thing, by the time we published. We interviewed over 1,000 companies, 1,000 C-suite executives and 500 mid-management executives. And basically what we found from it was very interesting, that 20% of the executives in our research actually believe that their company today has the kind of culture it takes to support the ongoing innovation needed to thrive. But then we asked one step further the question that, do you think you have what it needs? And 82% said that, oh yeah, that we can provide suitable structures to support innovation, right? And if we have the right structure of innovation, which is the resources, the funding, the actual physical location, then of course an innovation culture is going to follow. Our research actually disproved 82% of those executives. And what we landed up finding was that along with having the structures of innovation, which is the process, the technology, the resources, you need to actually have the right innovation behaviors and innovation mindsets. And when I talk about behaviors, I'm saying actions, habits, the responses, and then the mindset is the beliefs, the intentions, the notions. And you need to create this, what we call innovation value flywheel, that helps then create a sustained culture of innovation. And that was the core of our research. And happy to share that. It's actually public. Happy to share that document with you if you needed, because in there then we go through specific examples with clients on how have they actually built those behaviors and those mindsets to have that sustained culture of innovation. Let me pause here. I know we've got probably less than 20 minutes. I'm sure there may be more of Q&A, or Carla, things that you may want to kind of address, and maybe we open it up for a dialogue here.
Absolutely. Thank you, Shivani. And I just dropped a link into chat that will take people to Shivani's research. I'm not kidding. I have not stopped going back to this since she shared it. It is fantastic. And I think one of the things that it really underscores is that statistic that 90% of innovation happens out of traditional innovation groups. And you have some amazing case studies in there, Shivani. And I know one of the things that you and I talked about a little bit is what happens to companies when they focus purely innovation on a hub versus making it a broader, not only mindset. And I'd love for you to cover the flywheel, because I think that is fantastic. Like what's
here at my desk.
There you go. Thank you. Thank you. Like I think the performance of companies based on what you found in your research, I would love if you could just touch on that real quick. And then everybody, if you have questions or something you'd like to ask either Shivani or Kathy, please drop that into chat. We'd love to cover it.
Yeah, absolutely. This is so like any researcher, right? And Carla, you've written books on this topic, so you know this. Before Tom and I started out on the research, we actually did a scan of the internet to say what has been said before on the culture of innovation. And we found some really interesting articles and points of view, but we were looking for a gap. And that gap that we found was that nobody has empirical evidence. And I'm not talking about, I interviewed 30 companies, I interviewed 100 companies. We want it in the hundreds or close to 1,000 companies, right? At which point it becomes statistically significant. So we could not find any research with statistical significance that showed the correlation between companies that have a strong innovation culture also have strong financial performance. People say that, but there was no direct correlation that was proved. So in our research is for the first time that we've actually shown that. And what we found, so when we did our research, of the 1,000 companies, and we also looked at 1.5 million Glassdoor reviews, we used, of course, regression analysis and AI and, all of the fun modern technology things, right, that Carla was talking about earlier. And we've found about 247 companies, we call these pace setters, who had significant innovation culture, really good innovation culture, and they significantly outperformed the rest of them that we call stragglers. So the pace setters and stragglers, 247 companies that significantly outperformed from a performance standpoint, from a financial performance standpoint, compared to the stragglers, they had way better innovation cultures. And that innovation cultures, we actually created an innovation culture score. So if you look at in the appendix, there are details a bit on the innovation culture score. And we scored the companies, and we actually came out with that analysis. And what we found is that those pace setters grew 6.5 times faster. Their revenue was 6 times more than stragglers. They were more than 2 times profitable, more than twice profitable than the stragglers. And they were 4 times more efficient, i.e. cost efficiency compared to the stragglers. And again, this was for the first time. And these were all the hard numbers. Then they were the softer numbers as well. So we found that, pace setters had other advantages which were not financial that they enjoyed. They had a greater pace of scaling innovation. They had greater access to specialized talent. And they also had better ecosystem partnerships.
I love that. I'm going to share my screen just so I can show this wheel because I think it is so fantastic. Oh. You can see my big serve. There we go. This is the wheel. And I think this is so fantastic about how you've put it all together with all of the different aspects of what you found in the culture. Because I think really understanding, and this is why I find your research so valuable, Shivani, is how you've been able to put that empirical evidence behind this is what works. And I know, Kathy, there's some things that Shivani covers in her research that I think you've done really, really well at Emerson. Do you want to talk about a few of those? And I think enabling and doing is a big part of it.
Yeah, and I think it's so interesting. I kind of want to marry this with all the stuff we've done. I know exactly the people I want to send this to in the company, our chief technology officer in our automation business. I want to send it to our new CHRO. I think she needs to really work this into this as we build. I love Carla's notion of the consistency of coming up with innovative ideas. And this machinery to me is a backbone. And working for an engineering company, are you kidding? They love gears. I think I can socialize this at a level to get them to swallow it. They'll need to change all the words, of course, but it will still be the same thing. But I love the consistency of this. And I love the grit that it demands of a company. If anybody has read the books or the articles on the importance of that, because there takes, and I think you'll laugh at this, Carla, I think it's the thing that Marcia does well from an advertising and campaign and brand point of view of you doing the exact same things as this says. Because I kind of go with you on the same thing. It's not just new product development, it's how you live within the company. And how you have to actually spread like maybe better peanut butter around. But I do think this, we just went through this big, and I'm gonna use the word exploration as a company, and did our values, we've done our purpose, we've done our causes, and we did it with 17,000 people, engaged. We did it during the pandemic. 154 people out of 154 people joined for online forums of talking through who we are, who we want to be, and getting to one place as a group where everybody owned it. It's not like bringing in an outside firm that says, this is who you are, and this is how you're going to do it. It's saying, we are this, and we are doing this. We're going to drive innovation that leads us to a better place in the world, And I think it showed great, our archetype for the company is the explorer. And it is so fits with this that I think that's part of the reason I think we could adapt exactly how you look at this consistent process. So you can depend on tomorrow, right? On how you move new product, I think of all the things in the automation industry for science, for doing the vaccines. How about how all these companies, vaccine companies applied this? How else could they go warp speed? I mean, it's impossible. So Shivani, I think you are going to be world famous.
I would agree. I would agree. I'm going to flip back to this slide real quick, because I think as Kathy talked about this evolution from moving from minor revisions to major revisions and new to Emerson and new to the world, and then shifting from consider it solved to this that is much more empathetic marketing. I want to throw this one to you, Shivani, and look and talk about that role of empathy, greater empathy, not just in business and how we present ourselves, but what really is that role in innovation, and how do you see it play out? And what makes those high performers, those pace setters that you talked about, why are they so good at it?
Yeah, so this is a great point. And folks, for those who are interested, yesterday was the first of a 3-part series where I interviewed Adam Grant. And along with that, we also had 2 C-suite executives participate. We have 2 other series that are scheduled for April and May. We can send you the links when you get the link, when you register. It's free, of course. Just use my name so that it gets channeled to me in case you have any questions there. And there's also a growth diagnostic assessment that we have as part of that if you're interested, either for taking it for you or for your clients. And the whole concept of the customer empathy, I think, came out more after I read Adam's book. So you won't find it quite heavily in the research link that Carla sent you. The importance of empathy. And there is, from an innovation standpoint, we always used to look at customer empathy. What are the customer pain points? Always starting with a business problem. What is it that the customer is trying to solve? Or what pain point in the customer journey can we take out? And it can be a process. It could be through technology. It could be through any way, right? So empathy, customer pain points, customer journey. But I would say in my role over the last 2 years, especially given the pandemic and everything that we've seen, the whole concept of employee empathy also has taken front seat. And with that employee empathy, it strengthens the purpose piece of it that Carla talked about earlier, right? Because especially with COVID, people are actually now, right at the beginning of COVID, it was, well, you as an employer are not taking care of my mental health. What should I be doing? I have to take care of my kids and my husband and cook. And as a working woman, it is so difficult, right? So there was the empathy piece of it over there, at which point then it went from, it's literally all the cycles, right? From a psychology standpoint of fear and then anger, right? But from an empathy standpoint, after empathy, it's then all those conversations evolved into purpose. What is your individual purpose? What is the company's purpose? How do those align? And how is it, as marketers, we can actually bring that out and pull on that thread, both from a customer empathy and an employee empathy standpoint.
That's fantastic. And any last questions or thoughts, comments? Feel free. I think you can unmute yourself. We'd love to hear your feedback or just how you see this in your world. Do you have struggles with innovation in your own organization that you'd love to have Shivani and Kathy help you out with?
I actually asked Shivani a question that is sort of interesting, because I think we're in a little bit, I don't want to call it a tug of war, but kind of a two a little bit silos that we're trying to bring together between HR and marketing. And this is the thing that lives sort of in between. And it's kind of funny. We're not talking about R&D. We're talking about the HR group and the marketing people. And I'm curious how you balance that. And I wrote down on my notes here, marketing's role is to build the culture. I think the HR guys don't think that's true. And I'm curious what you think about that.
Yeah, this is not the first time we've been asked that question, again, from a consulting standpoint. The best way in which I've gone about doing that is literally doing A/B testing, literally doing focus groups, building out a wireframe, showing that, and then having the results. So we start off with marketing, right? Because you're absolutely right. Many times what happens, HR says, this is how it's going to be done. So I'll give you an example, right? With it's a retailer. It's a really large, one of the large footwear retailers, the largest footwear retailer in the country. The conversation I'm having with them is they want to completely change employee experience. That request did not come from HR. That request to me came from the innovation team, from the technology innovation team, saying, Shivani, we're doing so much in the metaverse. We're doing so much in virtual reality, but it's all aimed at our customer. We actually want to take that and aim it at our employees, but how do we convince HR to do that? So one of the ways in which we are doing it is, I'm scheduling stakeholder meetings, right? Because it's not just technology. There are 3 angles to employee experience. There is the technology digital experience. There is the physical experience. Are you in the office? Where are you, right? There's that element of employee experience. And then there is the HR element of employee experience. So it's all three stools. And to be perfectly honest, right now, I have all other pieces moving forward. It's much harder to kind of pull HR along in the process.
Okay.
It's true. It's true.
You make me feel better. Thank you. This
So
is
what
therapy.
we are doing, so what we are doing is we are creating a, I don't want to use the word pilot because it's more than a pilot, but it's kind of like a proof of concept or a pilot, whatever you want to call it, right? It doesn't involve HR right now. We are keeping HR informed, but we are actually doing that. We are doing the testing around that. We are showing the movement of the needle that, look, it's going from here to here, and this is what we're measuring, and this is how it's going to have an impact. And then take those results to the CHRO to say, wouldn't you want to do this for the entire organization? So that's how we use the innovation techniques, right? Which is the rapid prototyping, the piloting, all of that piece. And in some cases, we are actually not in some. In this particular case, we are using partners to do that too. So it's not just them building it in-house. It's like we're using, being scrappy and doing it very quick in a matter of a few weeks.
Did you do an employee value proposition?
They have one. They already have one. And so they already have one. Yes. Now, but they don't have one in terms of how do you use technology and VR and all of that to improve employee experience.
I bet.
But they do have one step higher, right? What is the employee value prop? They have that.
Okay.
It's like you have the evidence back to your research and evidence before to bring HR kicking and screaming into culture the way it needs to be done, right?
That is a very fair sentence. I always tell everybody your research is your sword and your shield, it's just the facts, ma'am,
Yeah.
Yes. Anybody have any thoughts or last questions? I know we're about at the top of the hour. I want to keep Dakota's promise that we're done in an hour. Anybody have anything they'd like to share?
Carla probably has a question.
Well, I have a whole list of them. Excellent.
One observation that I have, and it's not so much of a question, but you can all react to it, is, it occurs to me listening to all of you talk about this, that can you imagine 20 years ago, 10 years ago, even 5 years ago, nerding out about innovation techniques and importance? And I think that in and of itself kind of speaks to a pretty fundamental change in business. We're the Comic-Con of innovation right here in some way.
Yeah. Well,
I love that.
I think it's one of those times where, because of what we've been through the last 2 years, it's just accelerated so much of this. And the companies that struggle realize it's because you can't depend on a handful of people to really drive innovation and change, especially when you're in times of duress. It really is everybody's business. It is. Well, Kathy and Shivani, thank you so much. It has been fantastic having you here today. Anybody who has questions, I know sometimes we like to noodle on this a little bit. Phil, I'm going to offer this up for the both of them. Feel free to reach out and ask them questions. And I know when Dakota posts this on the ANA Chicago site, he's going to drop some links in, including Shivani's research, including the link to the webinars with Adam Grant that she mentioned. So I think those are things that you'd like to take a look at. I appreciate both of you. Thank you so much. It has been wonderful spending time talking about innovation with both of you today. One of the things that I mentioned early on is that there is a 1-question litmus test that you can ask as a team or as an organization to understand sooner rather than later, really, where are you in your innovation journey? And this is something that I learned from my friend, Michael Brenner. Some of you may know him. He was head of content at SAP, and he now owns a company called Marketing Insider Group. He's one of the most influential B2B marketers, and particularly influential to CMOs. So if you don't follow his work yet, I really, really encourage you to do that. He has a daily blog that he publishes that is a tremendous resource. But what he found, and I want to mention this, he wrote a book called Mean People Suck. And it's about how empathy leads to bigger profits and a better life as people. So tying it back to some of the things that Shivani was talking about, it's a fantastic read on empathy in business. And as part of the work that he does with his clients, one of the things that he realized is that there is one question that you can ask that helps people understand whether or not their ideas are being supported. And that one question is, does my boss support my ideas? He has his clients, if he's working on them from an empathy standpoint, actually give this survey to their employees to see what the answers are. And in one case, when he first started to use this, he saw, he and his clients saw an overnight change almost. Well, I say a quarter, but a quarter in a big company essentially is an overnight change. And he saw employee, it just jumped, it wouldn't move at all. Now it jumped ahead altogether. So let me put this back up. Here we go. He asked the one question, does my boss support my ideas? This change within one quarter, they saw employee engagement jump 20% within a single quarter. So if you're thinking that change and some of these things that we're talking about with Kathy and Shivani have to take a long time, that's not always the case. So there's lots of resources that both of them can provide you, whether it's previous interviews. I really encourage you to look into their work, into their research. There's a lot that you can learn from them that will help you shortcut this journey for you as B2B marketers when it comes to innovation. One of the things that I'd like to share, and feel free if you have questions for me, I'm happy to answer, follow up after today. At the bottom here is a link, and it takes you to an innovation archetype assessment. So you can find out what your own style of innovation is for you and how you interact with others and their own style. It's pretty insightful, both from an individual and a team perspective. So with that, Dakota, I am going to turn it back to you. And thank you again for having us.
Thank you all. Big virtual round of applause for everybody. I think an idea that we can all support going forward, I'm going to parlay this into the two reminder announcements, is that you can take everything you've learned here about kind of innovation and how it plays a role in defining marketing, and join us on April 6th as we talk with Richard Sanderson about kind of the golden age of marketers and what it means in this labor market in particular. And then, you know, because she promised, I think we all heard that, to come into town on April 20th for tacos and beer. It's an idea that nobody can put down. And I'll probably just have a few extra copies of your book, Carla, there for anybody that shows up. They're going to get a surprise gift for joining us. So mark your calendar for both of that. Again, thank you so much to all of you for joining us, and especially Carla, Shivani, Kathy. Like, this has been tremendous. Thank you. Have a great week, everybody.
Dakota. Thanks, Carla. Bye, Shivani.
Thanks.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.